Thưa quý vị, sau phiên đầu tiên về đối thoại chính sách, câu hỏi tiếp theo của chúng ta là những lĩnh vực nào, những điểm nhấn nào có thể sẽ bùng nổ, sẽ bứt phá trong thời gian tới, bất động sản, tài chính ngân hàng hay ngành hàng tiêu dùng hay các lĩnh vực hạ tầng khác. Ngay sau đây chúng tôi sẽ giới thiệu sự có mặt của các vị diễn giả. Ông Andrew Kim, Giám đốc phát triển Trung tâm M&A toàn cầu, Cơ quan xúc tiến đầu tư Hàn Quốc Kotra. Tôi giới thiệu, xin quý vị sẽ đứng lên để quý vị khán giả ở dưới có thể biết được. Xin mời Mr. Kim của Kotra. Xin trân trọng giới thiệu ông Andy Hồ, Giám đốc đầu tư của Vina Capital. Ông Nikut Sapru, Tổng Giám đốc Việt Nam và nhóm 5 nước ASEAN và Nam Á của Ngân hàng Standard Chartered. Ông Lê Mạnh Hùng, Giám đốc Công ty chứng khoán Ngân hàng Vietcombank VCBS. Ông Richard Lick, Giám đốc cấp cao Công ty bất động sản Alpha King. Ông Dennis Vertego, Phó Tổng Giám đốc Công ty Gamuda Land Việt Nam. Ông Stephen Wyatt, Tổng Giám đốc Công ty Dịch vụ Bất động sản JLL Việt Nam. Ông Ben Gray, Giám đốc thị trường vốn Công ty Cushman & Wakefield. Và điều phối trong phần này xin trân trọng giới thiệu Phó Giáo sư Tiến sĩ Nguyễn Việt Khôi, Phó trưởng khoa Kinh tế và Kinh doanh Quốc tế Đại học Kinh tế Đại quốc gia Hà Nội. Xin mời Giáo sư Nguyễn Việt Khôi sẽ bắt đầu ở phần thứ hai trong phần nhận diện các lĩnh vực bứt phá. Xin bộ phận kỹ thuật giúp chúng tôi đóng cửa ở hai bên hội trường để chúng ta tập trung vào trong phiên thứ hai của diễn đàn. Xin mời Giáo sư Khôi.
Trước hết thì xin gửi lời chào nồng nhiệt đến quý vị có mặt ngày hôm nay. Ở phiên trước thì anh Dominic, anh ấy nói tiếng Việt, tại vì là anh người nước ngoài nói tiếng Việt, vì phiên anh ấy lại nhiều người Việt. Thì trong phiên này xin phép thì phiên của tôi lại có rất nhiều người nước ngoài ở đây, thì tôi xin phép được nói tiếng Anh và nhờ sự trợ giúp của bên bộ phận phiên dịch. Yes, fellows, thank you so much for all speakers here today. And I would like to have a brief introduction from each of you. I think we should start from Richard. Yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Richard Leach. I'm the Senior General Manager for Alpha King Real Estate Company.
Very good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dennis Ng. I'm the Deputy CEO of Gamuda Land Vietnam.
Xin chào mọi người. Tôi tên là Lê Mạnh Hùng, là Tổng Giám đốc của Công ty Chứng khoán Ngân hàng Ngoại thương Việt Nam.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Andy Ho. I'm the Chief Investment Officer for Vina Capital.
Và tôi là Khôi, tôi đến từ Trường Đại học Quốc gia. Hôm nay rất vui được dẫn chương trình.
Good afternoon. I'm Niruk Sapru. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for Vietnam and the ASA cluster countries for Standard Chartered Bank.
Good afternoon. My name is Andrew Kim from M&A Center of Corporate HQ from Seoul.
Hi, good afternoon. Stephen Wyatt from JLL. I'm the country head of JLL. Thanks.
Hi, good afternoon. Ben Gray from Cushman & Wakefield, National Director of Capital Markets.
Okay, thank you, Nishu. As you know, the M&A's topic for this section about what industry or what sector will have breakthrough in the future, in the near future. So, and recently there are two sectors, real estate and banking, has some obstacle in terms of M&A. For example, like in the real estate, the authorities of the Ho Chi Minh City stop the project in the center of the city. And the second thing is about the banking. In the banking system, the foreign ownership law, if you want to do the M&A, the foreign investor had to have a investment, have a more than 10 billion US dollar in terms of the asset, and also have to have a profit more than 5 years in order to invest in the banking sector. And so what do you think about this situation? So you think that this will we will have a lot of M&A deals in the future in two sectors? And what happens if this obstacle can be solved? So that is the first thing I want to do some comments about this. The second one's about the banking lending. They lower the midterm and long-term lending to the real estate project only from 30 to 50%. So what do you think how real estate developer who need midterm and long-term capital can capture these opportunities? And the third one about the market, local market with more than 100 population. So what do you think about the fast-moving consumer goods or manufacturer or pharmacy? Do they attract more M&A deals in the future? So from that comments, I have some question. Yeah. So the first one I want to address the question to I think Dennis. Yeah. So Dennis is the owner of the Gamuda in Hanoi. So can you tell us about what do you expect from your partner, from local partner, and what factor impact your investing decision in your view? Is that okay? And each of you have any answer or you want to have comment, you can add on. Yeah.
It's a challenging question because at the moment, Gamuda Land Vietnam is operating in Vietnam on a 100% FDI basis. We have yet to cooperate with any local partner yet, but we are looking forward for this opportunity in the coming future. And this is where we are planning our business model to have flexibility as well as a more efficient approach in terms of moving into the local market, especially the local industrial player, which was seen that they are currently encountering multiple challenges as well as concern over the development at this stage, both Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi. For us to prepare ourselves to collaborate with any local partners, the main consideration that we're looking at is basically the stability of this particular partner, not in terms of only the financial stability, as well as the establishment in this market. For us, we are planning to contribute not only in terms of monetary value, but we also willing to contribute in terms of our expertise as well as our technology. Maybe I'll take a little bit back on history of our development. 10 years ago, when we first stepped into Vietnam, we started our first acquisition approach. We actually established our investment in Vietnam via an acquisition of a local SOE. And with that, ever since from there, we actually turned the whole investment around, especially in the southern of Hanoi. A lot of questions were asked to us, why are we investing in that particular area? Where many times people were complaining about how polluted the area is, how unlivable that particular area is. But we actually put our foot down by virtue of bringing in the technology to clean up the environment. And we are proud today to say that upon having access via the acquisition of this local partner, we have managed to basically turn the whole southern Hanoi into not only a livable area, but also a golden land for investors to take consideration in the coming future. Because the ample gap for the price today versus the price of future that this value addition process is going to bring in. To answer the question of what consideration that we have to put in place in terms of our local partner, I would say it will be on a case-to-case basis, where if we need to ascertain that we will contribute towards our expertise in terms of our technologies as well as our know-how in developing the township, we will actually focus on the understanding of this local investor in establishment of their land use right, as well as their legal basis in terms of managing that particular project. Many times we have experienced that, or not only us, some other foreign investor experience that if we don't go into the right project with a proper clearance of the legal basis, I have to emphasize the legal basis is being concerned, that define what would be the land use function they're going to carry out. That project will subject to threat and multiple challenges. If we clear all this at the beginning stage, it will pave a very smooth way for us to pursue further. That will be our expectation in terms of how we look at the threats and challenges when we team up with a local partner.
So why do I ask the question? Because our topic is about what sector and what industry will attract or will have breakthrough in M&A in the future, in the near future. But in order to have that, we need some improvement from the local partner, from ourselves. So that is, I need to know about that things from you. So now we have many fun over here. So I think I will address the question to Andy Ho. So what sector? And I know that you invest when you smell profit, right? So, but can you truly show your audience here what sector or what industry you would love to invest in terms of M&A in the near future? I know that's a confidential one, but maybe 1 minute you can tell something. Yeah.
Thank you. In 1 minute, I'm sure it'll be very difficult. I think big picture is that a big picture is that we look at Vietnam as a 100 million person economy, and we look at the demographic of the population as it's growing, it's making more and more money. As people make more and more money, where do they spend the money? So they will spend money on properties. That's why we have so many people here talk about properties. They would leave the money in a bank. They'll buy fast-moving consumer goods. They will put children through better education, basic education, English education, university education. And they'll use healthcare. They'll buy medicine, better medicine, safer medicine, as well as go to hospitals that are not putting 3 people in a bed, but 1 person in a bed. And so my point is we are interested in all the sectors that benefit or contribute to the growth of the domestic economy. We are not interested in export businesses, okay? And we're not interested in what we call consultancy, body shops, where the businesses do not scale. You need more people to grow. We're not interested in export, even though Vietnam is a very, very strong export-driven economy, simply because we feel that gross margins get thinner and thinner as competitions come about from Myanmar, Cambodia, Indonesia, Malaysia. And further to that, when it comes to export, you have to support a very high level of working capital. In an economy like Vietnam, where interest rates to borrow is 5, 6, 7, 8% is very high. So to keep a high level of working capital for a business is very dangerous. So we tend to focus on businesses that are focusing on Vietnam with great brand name, good distribution channel, and great manufacturing scalability.
Thank you, Andy. I think, Mr. Hùng, you also invest a lot of sectors in Vietnam, so you want to add on something?
Okay. I would like to speak in Vietnamese for more clear. Việt Nam có một cái dân số là khoảng hơn 100 triệu người, Và tôi cũng cho rằng là cái section mà rất chi là được quan tâm trong thời gian tới đấy chính là cái khối banking và cái khối financial service cho cái dân số như này. Cũng như là ông Andy Ho vừa mới nói thì là rõ ràng thì người ta sẽ phải dùng tiền, người ta có thêm tiền, người ta sẽ phải dùng tiền vào đâu. Thế thì khối banking trong thời gian tới cũng sẽ là một khối rất chi là được quan tâm. Đấy là trong dài hạn, còn đặc biệt là trong ngắn hạn thì chúng ta đang có, Ngân hàng Nhà nước đang có một cái đề án là mang số hiệu là 1058 liên quan tới cái việc là tái cơ cấu các ngân hàng và kèm theo là xóa những cái nợ xấu, thì nó kết thúc vào 2020. Thì tôi hy vọng là trong vòng năm nay và năm sau sẽ có những cái thương vụ M&A khá lớn đối với các cái ngân hàng liên quan tới cái quá trình tái cơ cấu này. Thì đấy là những cái dấu hiệu trong ngắn hạn. Ngoài ra thì cái việc mà Việt Nam áp dụng các cái chuẩn mực tài chính mới như là Basel II hoặc là hơn nữa thì cũng sẽ khiến cho là các cái ngân hàng phải tăng cường cái năng lực tài chính của chính bản thân mình. Thì cái đấy cũng sẽ là một cái cơ hội cho cái việc M&A các ngân hàng trong nội bộ với nhau và các cái nguồn vốn từ bên ngoài chảy vào. Một cái xu hướng nữa cũng vừa mới đây được thông qua, đấy là cái hiệp định thương mại tự do giữa Việt Nam và châu Âu, EVFTA. Thì tôi cho rằng là cái đó thì nó lại đi kèm với cái việc là mở rộng cái sở hữu của cái khối các cái nhà đầu tư từ châu Âu vào cái lĩnh vực ngân hàng, thì cũng sẽ là một cái động lực cho cái mặt này, cái lĩnh vực này phát triển trong thời gian tới. Thế thì đấy là những cái mảng mà cái tôi đang làm việc thường xuyên, và tôi thấy cái cơ hội các cái khách hàng đến trao đổi, và ngay cả trong ngắn hạn cũng như là dài hạn thì tôi cũng xin nhấn mạnh là một trong những cái lĩnh vực sẽ được quan tâm trong thời gian tới, thì tôi cho rằng đấy là khối tài chính và ngân hàng. Xin cảm ơn.
Thank you, Mr. Hung. So how about Neeraj from Standard Chartered? They make a lot of investment in Vietnam recently. And yeah, you want to add on something?
Thanks, Professor. So I think the sectors that are really interesting, clearly from the very short term, I think people have covered it, banking, finance, real estate, you've got a big panel. But I think the sectors that are really interesting are the ones that Andy highlighted. Education, healthcare, travel. I think those three, especially English education. I also think, broadly speaking, as you look into the future, what I would call broadly clean tech, clean energy, those kind of areas will become rapidly more important. I think the challenge in the broad financial services sector is that consolidation. And I think both in the consumer finance industry, where I think there are too many players trying to expand too fast, and in the banking sector itself, there are just too many players who cannot scale. I think consolidation. So I think that would be my thoughts.
Ben, you want to say something?
Quite a challenging one for real estate in general. I think in the next, let's say, 18 to 24 months, with some of the review process we're seeing now around land use rights certificate granting, etc., we might start to see some more interest, if you like, on the merger side of the M&A sphere, with perhaps some consolidation in the construction sector, for example, when we may start to see some of the groups now that have had projects delayed with their master contract now, perhaps looking to work with some of their other partners in the markets to access land banks, etc., and developers where the projects are going forward. So we think that could be of great interest. In real estate specific, again, one of the circulars that came out recently was Circular 36, which governs lending into real estate. Subsequently, we've seen developers now looking for capital. This could be ranging, well, most of the time when we see it, it's on a short-term basis, 12 to 24 months. And it's usually to allow developers to proceed with the project. As we start to see the source of senior debt financing withdraw from this market, we're starting to see private investors moving in. We think that that is something that will accelerate over the next 18 to 24 months quite dramatically.
So, do you have anything to add on? You want to some comment? How about
Anything?
Okay, you are.
I'll just.
How about Stefan? Yeah.
I'll just add a few points in terms of, I think what's generally been raised. The biggest issue in the market, as we all know, is approvals. This needs to be cleaned up. I mean, I cannot emphasize enough how damaging this is to the real estate market. So I would encourage government officials, local authorities. This has been going on for too long. It's damaging the real estate industry. So collectively, as an industry, we're all here today. Let's stand up and start, trying to get this issue out in the open and trying to get some approvals through, because it's dragging down the market. It's having an effect on foreign investment into Vietnam. Foreign investors are now, the first question that we get asked from foreign investors is, what's the latest situation with approvals? Not where the opportunities are. So we need a systematic change in what's happening in the market, in my view. So that has to happen before we start talking about more M&A transactions and more things happening in the market, because it's starting to have a very damaging impact.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Stephen. So I have one question to address to Richard and to Dennis. Because I think that your strategies is like totally opposite. You like the suburbs of the city. You like the golden land, okay, in the real estate. So as an observer, I don't know how you decide to do that. And is that still the same strategy in the future, or you change so that I will buy some land from suburb, or I will focus on buying land in the city for myself?
I think it's quite clear, Alpha King's strategy. Alpha King is an international real estate investor coming to Vietnam 3 years ago, and identified an opportunity as Vietnam has grown, as it's moved up the food chain, the middle class has emerged, and now we have an affluent class. So we targeted and focused on District 1 in Ho Chi Minh City. So we've got a few projects, Bao Sun Shipyard project. We've got 2 projects, one in Hong Quang and Chan Hong Dao, and they are primarily focused on the affluent class. So we do a mixture of residential and commercial as well. Obviously, it's not easy to compete in the mass market space, but there is a demand in the very high-end luxury space. So that's where we identified an opportunity for investment. And so far it's gone extremely well, and we expect to be able to expand on that initial strategy as well. Whether we go to the suburbs and have to compete with Gamuda, who knows? But right now, we focused on high-end commercial residential in the hotspots of District 1.
Is that the Hong Kong style? Is that Hong Kong style? And then it's from the American style? Just kidding. Okay, yeah, you can.
For us, I won't put it on whether it's a Hong Kong or American style. Because for us, we are looking at more on a practical approach. First of all, we want to thank Richard with the Alpha King approach. That first, it drives up the market value. This is one of our requirements that we're looking at when we come into Vietnam. We're looking at what would be the tipping point of the highest real estate market price. And when it reaches the highest, we are benchmarking against our development. We have vast experience in terms of turning around urban land into golden land. This is where in Malaysia, we have established a few infrastructures, backbone of Kuala Lumpur, that actually lead into the urban development. From there itself, we create a success story where we have bring up all the land value that develop along the highway that we have established. So the same concept we brought in here in Vietnam 10 years ago. is that we look at the development of this country in a very positive mind. We know that in the next few years, from the time when we step down, we see there will be positive indication in terms of this development. This is where we have struck the, the bullseye. We've seen that this country is achieving a double-digit growth every year in the GDP, as well as all the macroeconomic indicator, and that reinforced our strategy. When we came into time, the land price was actually at the lowest point, the area that we are focusing on. But the efforts and also the technology and the know-how that we brought in to create a township has actually turned the whole environment around. Today, we can see the CAGR that we have obtained from the time we developed until now, it has grown to double digit. That's actually a very encouraging number. Because from the time when we step in, we look at it, oh, less than $1,000 you get a square meter. What we are looking at when the next launch will be put out, it will be close to $2,000. So you can see the appreciation of what we are doing, as well as the numbers game that we are playing. Because if you put all your bets inside the city, but of course there's a risk to it. You may strike a higher price, but of course the number game itself, we may strike higher numbers of sales in that vast development and the huge land that we have obtained. That is our stand.
Okay, thank you. So why do I ask that question? Because in terms of like a sector, like real estate, they also divide into the suburbs area or the downtown, the city, the golden land. So we can, as an investor, we can think about that. So come back to the country focus. FII, you know, in 2017, the M&A is like the years of the Thai people, the Thai deal. And 2018, the years of the Korean investor. And 2019, we expect about the Chinese, even the Chinese investor. So I want to come back to the country focus and about the question to, I read the question to Andrew Kim. He's from Korea, Kocha. And can you tell us about what sector or industry that the Korean investor love to invest in Vietnam? And do you see any changing of investing style recently in Korea?
So before starting the Korean investors' tendencies, it would be much easier for us to deal with about Vietnam M&A's uniqueness in comparing the other Southeast nations. For example, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, and other Southeast Asian islands, they're favorable or one of their most favorite sectors to invest should be real estate or financials, of course, and in energies. It's quite common to all over the world. But it's quite unique for Vietnam. So one of the most favorite sector or field should be the industrials, which including machinery, electricities, or engineering. So mainly this is coming from the idea that Vietnamese main industrial parts is coming from manufacturing procedures. So this is quite the same trend which South Korea investment have. So we have some bold transitions between 1960 to 70 to 1980 to 90, because there's something different happened between 70 to 80 is about two aspects. First aspect is about the sector itself. Yeah, traditionally and still the industrial sector is one of the favorite, sectors for Korean investors, and also along with the other one, including energies, financials, also real estate. But nowadays it varies. I want to say it's quite diverse along with the local consumptions. As you already mentioned, as Mr. Professor Koy already mentioned, the more than 100 million populations, which ensure you more profitable market for many diverse industries, such like utilities or consumer products. I try to focus on the specific two parties. One is utility, which is directly linked to the industrial, which means that electricity or water treatment center. This kind of utility industry is directly linked to the industrial factors, such like to support fresh water to the industrial zones or electricity. So this kind of sectors is quite, one of the hottest items for Korean investor. The other one is consumer product, but I try to focus on not a consumer staples, but a consumer discretionaries. The difference from staples and discretionary is quite easy. Staple is basic concept of apparels and F&Bs, where low level of technology needed. But consumer discretionary is based on home appliance, electronic appliance, and automobiles, which is highly necessary for the part of technology. So nowadays, Korean investors try to focus on consumer product, especially for the discretionary. And the other bold transition happens between 1970 to 80 is the investor itself. So before 1970, right after Vietnam joined to WTO systems, the main investor was led by the conglomerates, South Korean conglomerates and its affiliates. And as you already know, that thanks to the SK and Bean groups, they've been more than 1 billion deals. This kind of huge, massive deal lead the whole market from South Korea. But in terms of transaction value, or transaction volume itself, it is true. There are many conglomerates who heavily invest on the Vietnamese market, but in terms of the deal account, which means that deal numbers, SMEs, especially a deal between 20 to 80 million size one, is jump up, quantum jump happens. And it's, as I know, first half of this year, and it's more than dozens of the deals already got done from South Korean SME players. So this kind of preference is coming from the idea that their investing size is, as already mentioned, that consumer product, utilities, which is really easy to small size investment. So this kind of transaction is happen at the same time.
Because recently, like SK and Bean Group, so they have a buy 20%, but without controlling. So can you have some comment about that style?
Yeah, same as one you have in your own countries. South Korean investor really addicted to the controlling power or governance structures, same as what the traditional entrepreneurs prefer. I mean, South Korean investors prefer to have more than majority or more than 80%. But nowadays, the trend is quite different. So this is totally coming from the systems which Vietnam ensuring to the foreign investors. So may some of them have a methodologies to have a safe exit plan, and maybe some of them believe that, I mean, acting like the financial investor, they can believe that we can manage to structure the company with the minority shares. So as you already mentioned, that the joint venture between the SK and the Bean Group, the SK party is only charging over 23.5%, but still, we believe that even though it is not a majority, even though it's not ensuring any corporate governance or controlling powers, itself, it meaning a lot for the South Korean investors. So they believe that, anyway, I can secure my shares, or I can secure my investment, dealing with this kind of strategic minor shares.
Yeah, because I think our Vietnamese partner have more and more, build more and more trust from the foreign investor. So that can be a good signal for the economy. So now I want to go to back to the real estate valuation. We know the role of the lawyer company and the consultant. So what do you think about that kind of company? And I think Ben, you wanted to have some comment about this.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's a old saying that the easiest way to destroy a deal is to give it to a lawyer or an accountant, and they tend to make it go very bad quickly. I think with any M&A deal, be it Vietnam or one of the offshore markets, I mean, your consultants are very key. In Vietnam, with the regulations, legislation framework for foreign investment, direct or indirect, it's complicated. And within what you're looking at, your target company, it can get very complicated very quickly as well. So your consultant, it's got to be a body or group led by an individual that has the experience and is creative. I think that's a key thing. They have to be able to look at a problem, and we see them all the time. My favorite one is usually that buildings are too big, and work out how to fix it in a way that can actually, mitigate the risk for the buying party. It's not rocket science, but you'll be amazed the amount of times that advisory can come out of a consultancy that hasn't really been thought through. Another good example of this I had recently was on I think it was $30 million US, and the tax load would have been 0.01%, $30,000. The commentary that came out of the consultant at the time was that this is very, very high and should be seen as a risk, to which any other party would look at that and say, well, the other option's a 20% tax load. So, you need to be very careful of the optics as well when you're looking at these kind of deals. But in general, just pick and choose your consultants wisely and look at track record and look at the ability to close deals and to minimize that execution risk.
I think, Andy, you want to say something?
So we've done almost 200 deals in Vietnam, and one of the things I can say for people who own businesses to look for investors like ourselves is that you do want good consultants, good lawyers to help you find an investor. But the key is the definition of a good consultant. Please go find someone who has experience. You should ask to show you at least 5 transactions they've done. Talk to the people that they have helped. I see too many times you find someone because he or she is a friend and they give you bad advice. I've seen businesses go bankrupt because they cannot close the transaction. The business goes bankrupt. You lost everything because time is not on your side. You keep negotiating, but you fail. The consultant failed to teach, to consult the owner that certain terms are normal and other terms are not. And they don't give proper advice. They don't give proper advice on valuation. They don't give proper advice on legal. They don't give proper advice on due diligence. And as a result, the negotiations is going, and pretty soon the business runs out of money. Okay? So my advice to people who want to raise money is if you need a consultant, which you tend to, please go with someone with a brand name. Ask for at least 5 transactions that they have done. And this transaction should be in a similar industry, in a similar sector that you are in. Because a person who advises on real estate may not be a good person to advise on the sales of a fish company, or on the sales of a computer company, or sales of a steel company, or sales of a hospital. Each sector have its very unique characteristic that the consultant must understand. Okay? So my advice is make sure you get good consultants, good lawyers, good Big 4 accountants, good valuation people, and make sure they have a lot of experience.
But can I have argument here? We are in a low contact M&A, low contact and high contact culture, opposites. So like they treat their friends and yeah.
Sure, and you know that I did a deal. Yeah. It's called the chicken and the egg deal.
Yeah.
Right? No advice, no consultant. Everything became a mess.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah. So now I think I would give the floor to the audiences here. So if you have any question, please ask the panelists, and we would like to answer all your question. Yeah.
It's Tom from VNG. We appreciate and share the same sentiment that Andy has on the Vietnam consumer story. So we operate in that space, and we really appreciate all the Vietnamese consumer. I think one of the things that this forum is about M&A, and investors come to Vietnam just like a lot of the investors and advisors and so forth. It's about stability, whether it's economic stability and political stability. And from the economic side, and here the discussions talking about a lot of the investment, but I would presume that we principally talk about equity. But my questions is about debt and convertible debt. So I would love to hear perspective, because there are bankers, there's investors, and there's advisors on the panel that can comment a little bit of an insight on the level of corporate debts in Vietnam. That's number one. And number two is the convertible debt utilization by investors. How does that impact your decision and expectations? Because both of those things do play into financial and economic stability for the Vietnam market that will continue to support prospective investment interest. Thank you.
So any one of you want to answer the question? Ben?
Again, this is coming from a real estate perspective rather than FMCG, but we're finding now more and more groups that they're coming in and looking at another developer, and they have option one, come in as a partner in a joint stock company, pump in some equity, take on that risk, that equity level of return, still in the double digits. But then the investors are coming through and they're looking to mitigate the downside risk, and they're saying, okay, let's go for some form of debt trade on that. As long as they're within the regulations in the State Bank of Vietnam and they can lend in the country, then they can still generate some good returns. The concern on that is mainly on matching risk. So when it comes down to the convertible side, I'm not seeing very much of it at the moment, and some of the banker guys here could probably answer that better than me. The general rule of thumb is that it should be a little bit cheaper, subject to the target company who's looking to raise the finance and their prospects. Are they going through an IPO? Have they got a fantastic land bank? All of this good story. So that feeds back into the valuation side of it. Again, the consultancies understand very clearly which industry you're investing into. I think in general, corporate debt in Vietnam, limited exposure to the US dollar, it's not been something that's been raised by any of our investors in the region as being a concern and something they have to be worried about in the short to mid-term. Again, some of the guys on the panel can probably expand on that better than I can.
Hi. Just so that I understand the question, it was on level of corporate debt generally and access to debt for M&A. Was that? Okay. I mean, level of corporate debt depends on the industry, depends on the type of companies. You get highly leveraged companies and you get under-leveraged companies. So that depends on...
Obviously, there's significant variation between corporates and industry, but I'm just saying in general, because there's going to be a massive amount of default and risk of non-payment and so forth. And so I'm just saying in broad general, not industry-specific corporate debt level. So you have public, private, and individual debt. I think we talked a lot about private debt, but also this one is about corporate debt.
Okay. So on the corporate debt side, clearly, in the current benign environment, we are seeing, basically the opportunity. Most companies are in reasonably good shape because the economy is in good shape, right? It was last tested 6-7 years ago. The good news seems to be that there's a beginnings of an life insurance market, which then leads to debt capital markets rather than just bank finance for long-term finance. So we're seeing the beginnings of wrap transactions. We ourselves have led 8 out of 10 of the local currency wrap deals that have taken place in Vietnam, placed into the insurance market. I would say just generally on M&A finance, cross-border M&A finance is obviously very active into Vietnam. We ourselves are very active on Vietnam. On domestic M&A, I don't see much M&A finance in the M&A finance context. I see mispriced lending, which is cheap lending as substituting equity. So not convertible debt or whatever, but just straight senior debt being mispriced and misused by investors to take advantage of IRRs because of the fact that they're getting cheap lending from banks who don't understand necessarily what they're doing. So that would be my sense.
Sure. Okay. So from the investor's perspective, there are a few levels of debt. One, if you are to pursue a control deal, you are most likely going to buy the equity of the business. You could go to the bank and borrow some money to help you purchase the business in addition to the equity side. That's where perhaps your cost of funding the debt side is cheaper than the cost of equity. But that's a very complicated exercise. I've only seen a few cases done in Vietnam to that effect. In terms of corporate debt, most of the time the commercial banks are providing corporate debts and they are fully collateralized. There are a number of cases where investors will use margin trading, using shares as collateral to borrow and using the proceeds to buy more shares, so what we call margin borrowing. In terms of corporate bonds, we do see a lot of corporate bonds. We participate in a lot of corporate bonds. It gives you optionality and it gives you protection. It gives you protection in the sense that a lot of the corporate bonds do have some sort of collateral. It does pay a running yield, anywhere between 5 to 10%. It could be US dollars or it could be in VND. Most of the time it's VND. And at the end of the term, roughly 3 years later, you could get an IRR or a catch-up, roughly 10, 15, 20% above and beyond the running yield that you have. But also at the end of the term, you have an option to convert into the equity of the business. But the key is what valuation. Did you pre-agree the valuation today? Did you pre-agree on a multiple of the earnings or the multiple of EBITDA today? Or do you wait for tomorrow's value? It really depends on the situation, on the valuation. But the key here is that when it comes 3 years from now, you have the option to convert into equity to enjoy the upside potential, at the same time protecting yourself on the downside. That's the sweet spot of convertible bond. Now, businesses may not be able to issue convertible bond because they cannot take on more debt. And that's usually why private equity people like us come in. If the business can take on more debt, they will probably go to the bank. Because they cannot take on more debt, they tend to look at equity investors. So in most cases, we have to put equity in. But in some cases, we will ask for a convertible bond into the business. Now, the other thing to think about is when you convert, what are you converting into? You're converting to common shares. Can you trade the common shares? The common shares must be listed in order for you to trade freely. If it's not listed, then you have to find another way to sell the shares. So that is a challenge. You want a convertible bond, yet 3 years from now, 4 years from now, you convert to the equity. Has the company listed on the Ho Chi Minh City Stock Exchange or Hanoi? If they haven't, then you have to figure out how do you sell your shares. Because most of the time, if everything is good, but you can't see the company listing, you may say, I don't want to convert. Give me the principal and the interest back, because that's my guarantee exit. Okay, I hope that helps you understand that.
Anyone else? So now I have one question, written one in Vietnamese. And I will brief translation like this. I listen to all of you, and I know that you focus on the opportunities for the investor, the role of the government, and the challenges to the investor. So my question to all of you is that, what is your motivation? I mean, investment motivation. When you invest in a sector or industry in Vietnam in terms of M&A. So what is your motivation for to do the in a sector? What is your motivation? What are you looking for? So that is a $1 million question.
Yeah.
I think I'll start first from the investors that we're dealing with. So we see multi-number of foreign investors still very, very interested in Vietnam. The reason and the motivation that they're interested in Vietnam comes back to the overall the story that Vietnam tells. So it's still a very compelling reason to invest in Vietnam. 96 million population. The fundamentals of Vietnam are still very, very strong. The economy is strong. So all the fundamentals are there, which is why we see a lot of foreign investment coming into the country. So the motivation is backed by, the very strong fundamentals. Now, in terms of which sector, from a real estate point of view, to be honest, foreign investors are looking at all sectors. Industrial, very, very active at the moment, purely because we've seen a lot of free trade agreements being signed off, movement from China, et cetera, et cetera. So industrial, export-driven economy, government, supporting, economic zones, et cetera. But if you look at all sectors within the real estate industry, there's a fairly compelling reason why you would invest. There's some pockets of the market that are looking oversupplied, but fundamental, the backdrop is still very strong for investing in Vietnam.
Okay, thank you. Anyone?
Yeah, I just add obviously the growth coming from the fundamentals. The supply is definitely lacking in all sectors, particularly in the commercial sectors. Whether we're looking at retail, industrial, or office, we see a shortage of supply. We benchmark against our regional neighbors, and there are neighbors that we aspire to be like and overtake, and we have a long way to go. And so there's a great opportunity to bridge that gap. We see that in the future, Ho Chi Minh City should be a world-class city, or at least a regional class city. It should be as good, if not better, than Bangkok, KL, Jakarta, and Manila, and so on. And so there's a huge opportunity there. And through the infrastructure, through the partnerships between foreign and local investors, we can create that world-class city. A smart, an iconic, there's so many opportunities there to create that and surpass what is around us.
I think at the end of the day, as investors, domestic investors and international investors, we want risk-adjusted return. Okay, simple. The growth of the economy, the demand, everything contributes to the risk-adjusted return. It could be unrealized value or it could be realized value. So for example, we invested in Vinamilk when it was $450 million in value in 2005. Today is a $12 billion companies. That's exactly why we invest in Vietnam. It grows in value. It grows in brand name. It grows in distribution. Now from that, we learn a lot. We learn a lot from that, and we use what we learn to make more investments that we hope can deliver more return. Okay, so the motivation at the end of the day for us is to deliver return to our investors, whether it's realized or unrealized. And the second motivation is we have to learn quickly from all these investment deals. We make a lot of mistakes. We learn from our mistakes. And the next deal we do, we try to become more successful in terms of delivering risk-adjusted return.
Thank you, Andy. Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, I might just add on that I think apart from obviously the returns that are to be generated in consistent return and risk-adjusted returns that Andy highlighted, I think the issue really is that if you look at the broad spectrum of opportunity for Vietnam, one of the areas that has been talked about in the past, and there have been a couple of really successful transactions. Sabeco was a good example of a very large transaction out of the public sector space. So I think some of the opportunities that may come from proper SOE equitization, if those take place, makes Vietnam an interesting place to stay in touch for a foreign investor, because the scale of some of those opportunities is quite significant. Now, landing those opportunities will take time and challenges around. I think that's also part of the excitement of Vietnam, other than the 96 million people and the 7% GDP growth. I think some of the scale of opportunities are also.
Okay, so I would have some more questions from audiences.
Hi, my name is Gwen. I'm from RMIT, and I am interested in real estate. So Mr. Stephen said something about the approval process is posing a challenge for investors who are interested in Vietnam. I would like to ask that, apart from those challenges, is there a bright side to long approval process? Is it going to increase transparency in the real estate market?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I suppose the easy answer is yes. I think if we're going through this process for the right reasons and ultimately we're going to have a more transparent market at the end of the day, this is a great result. And I think this is what we all want as investors and consultants and to sort of live and work in a country that is more transparent. So ultimately, yes, if we can go through this process and come out at the other side and have a market that is, I think, more on a level playing field for both foreign and local investors, I think that has to be a good thing. The challenge that we see at the moment is that there is a lot of investigations that are taking place where we're not seeing a completion. We've got a very long, drawn-out process, and we're not seeing a completion to those investigations. So what we would really like to see is, yes, it's fine to investigate. Let's clean up the market, but let's reach a conclusion as well, and let's draw a line under the investigations. This has been going on for far too long. It's a year, 18 months, 2 years for some of these projects. And I think developers and contractors are getting very, they get put in a very difficult financial situation because of the market.
So, Chang, are you satisfied with the answer? Okay, thank you. So I think the time is up. So to close our session, I want to ask each of you the same question. So each of you just answer very shortly. Can you list for me 3 sector or industry that you think will have a breakthrough in M&A in the near future? So let's start from Richard.
Yeah, that's pretty easy based on a lot of the discussion what we've had, particularly with the lack of supply. But the one that, it's not in a particular order, but I think that the one that is ignored, that still has a lot of legs, is in the real estate sector, is on the retail side and retail development. And then obviously commercial grade A office development, where there's a terrible undersupply and high demand. Just obviously getting the right locations is not that easy. And then the high-end luxury sector on the residential, where there's pretty thin oxygen. There's not much going on up there, and the launches are very few, and there doesn't seem to be much coming up either.
Okay, thank you. Dennis? Yes, just the name of the 3 sectors.
I would agree with Richard on that real estate opinion. But to add on to that, my opinion is that the up and coming M&A, the breakthrough that we are looking forward to is that the international player as well as the local player, that will going into those landowner, that either land owned by a real estate developer or a private owner that are willing to open up their land for development. That will actually address the concern of what Stephen has mentioned just now on the compliance issue. With a clearer understanding of that landowners' ability to develop as well as their land use function, that will open the leeway for all international developer or player to make it a bigger investment as well as a more efficient approach, where a combination of the expertise as well as financing requirements. The second sector that we're looking at, which is pretty much related to real estate, which I think most of us are quite enthusiastic to look at, is the co-working space industry. We are not looking at the pure co-working industry itself. We are looking at the substance that attached to the co-working. For us, we are looking for partners and investors to work together to establish an environment to promote startups. Because in the next coming generation, everybody knows that startups will play a very important role. They don't look for huge capital, but they create a huge efficient in terms of the market controls on their new business, new ideas, and new developments. As far as third sectors that I'm looking at is edutainment, because throughout my stays in Vietnam for the last 8 years, I've seen that the development in edutainment is rather slow. With the strong growth of the young communities of Vietnamese and the increase in the purchasing power, I think the next and up and coming will be focusing on the edutainment sector. A lot of players are jumping into entertainment sector and hospitality. I think that is pretty much focused on complementing with their development. But to take a step backward, focusing on edutainment will basically not only cover the entertainment sector, but as well as the growth that required in this particular community, young and energetic community that will become the next China. Looking at it, we have pretty strong confidence. Last 10 years, we came in with a strong focus on how Vietnam going to grow. And the next 10 years, we look at it, Ho Chi Minh going to be transformed into the next Shanghai, and Hanoi going to be transformed into the next Beijing. So stay tuned for this great development in Vietnam. Thank you.
As I mentioned at the beginning of the sector, banking sector is our my first choice, and secondly is the healthcare industry, because the Vietnamese people getting older, and we live longer, and healthcare I think is the sector that will be very interesting to invest in. And the last thing is the infrastructure of the Vietnam. So maybe this story will last for like 20 years. We still need more road, more facility to develop our country. So it's my 3 options.
Well, we like all sectors in Vietnam at the moment. All sectors. But I agree. Healthcare is going to be good, but more specifically hospitals. We're going to see more consolidation of hospitals. It gives access to a lot of customers, and it is a sector we can make more and more money as the people get wealthier and wealthier. But you have to work with the social insurance, the healthcare insurance, the corporate insurance, etc. We also like consumer goods, particularly in the food and beverage space. Again, you have to have brand equity and a good distribution channel. We also think that there'll be some activities in the construction material space. What happens is Vietnam is becoming a good manufacturing hub. So not only are you producing construction materials for domestic consumption, but now you can produce goods for regional exports. So we're seeing a lot of companies that are able to move beyond Vietnam, like Hoa Phat, to produce steel, really good steel, in Vietnam, as well as export in the regional countries. We think that in the terms of the real estate space, it's still going to be difficult, but it will be revolving around M&A deals around project levels, not at the corporate levels. People will buy projects. But again, some of the challenges that developers face in terms of approval will make it a bit more difficult for any sort of M&A activities to go on. In the other sectors like banks, we do like it, but unfortunately the legal restrictions is very restrictive in this space. So there will be activities, but the restrictions prevent it to be a lot of activity. Okay?
So I think I'll leave you with 3 themes. I'm not going to give you a particular sector or particular what's going to happen next week, but 3 themes. I think anything clean, green, and sustainable. That's the first theme. The second would be supporting the growth of affluence in Vietnam, so healthcare, travel, education. And the third theme would be services broadly on what I would call the gig sharing and the financial services space. Those would be the three things that I think we're going to see quite a bit of.
So many of you already covered lots of the sectors. I try to focus on consumer discriminatory, such like that. The motor generation doesn't come yet in here, Vietnam, but we got gifted 100 million population income of the home appliance, automobiles, that kind of consumer products would be the one of the hottest item in the future, I believe. And the other one, awkward to say that I believe IT, which is probably based on telecommunications. You already got a human resources, well-trained engineers. You have a lot of university who trained your local students in dealing with IT program and that kind of stuff. Also, lots of the people already got their, initial gadget or cell phones or smart here. So it's quite tasteful, which means that the basic or the environment of the Vietnam itself is quite good to improving IT industry in here, so I believe in the future. Also, lots of M&A deals could be coming from IT fields.
Okay, three sectors that we quite like at the moment, and we see potential. So the industrial logistics sector, I think we've touched on, and I think there's longevity in that, especially in terms of e-commerce coming into play. Big growth on the e-commerce side, so that logistics sector is looking quite interesting. Office, as Richard touched on, office both grade A and grade B, I think is an interesting sector, and I think very undersupplied at the moment and big potential in both cities. And then for us, what we call alternatives, which I think has been touched on as well. Alternative is anything non-core real estate, and that can be healthcare, it can be education, data centers for us now is quite an interesting sector as well. So the alternatives to the to core real estate is going to be quite an interesting sector moving forward.
I think being the last in the line, that's pretty much the entire market covered. The addition I'd make on for real estate would be hospitality. Domestic tourism numbers are increasing year on year, as are international arrivals, so there's a lot of space we could move into that. Otherwise, pure real estate, as Andy said and Stephen said, project level investment. If you can find me a project that's correctly valued, then you'll be able to sell it very quickly, but they're tough to find. And outside of that, it would be, as described as alternatives. Education is a bit of space we're starting to see a lot more interest in, driven primarily out of the private equity groups.
Okay, thank you all of you. I think that the audience have your own answer, and you can find the suitable sector for yourself in the future. So I would like to close our session and leave the floor for the third session. Thank you so much.
Xin cảm ơn Phó Giáo sư Tiến sĩ Nguyễn Việt Khôi. Xin mời quý vị diễn giả chúng ta tiến lên phía trước một bước và kính mời ông Lê Trọng Minh thay mặt cho ban tổ chức sẽ trao kỷ niệm chương để ghi nhận cảm ơn sự đóng góp của quý vị dành cho phiên thứ hai của diễn đàn ngày hôm nay. Và ngay sau đây chúng ta sẽ chuẩn bị cùng tới với phiên thứ 3. Sau những câu chuyện về chính sách, sau những câu chuyện về các lĩnh vực, các điểm nhấn mà chúng ta có thể kỳ vọng bứt phá, thì câu chuyện một thương vụ M&A đã được tổ chức thành công, đã được ký kết thành công. Việc xây dựng thương hiệu và tiếp tục phát triển thương hiệu của doanh nghiệp như thế nào? Chúng ta sẽ cùng lắng nghe chia sẻ của các luật sư, của các diễn giả là chính những doanh nghiệp đã tiến hành các thương vụ thành công, và với sự điều phối của một lãnh đạo doanh nghiệp đồng thời là một chuyên gia thương hiệu mà chúng tôi xin được giới thiệu ngay sau đây. Xin được giới thiệu các vị diễn giả trong phiên thứ 3, gồm có ông Samir Disit, giám đốc điều hành của Brand Finance châu Á Thái Bình Dương, bà Vũ Thị Thuận, chủ tịch hội đồng quản trị của dược phẩm Trafaco, ông Hữu Tín, chủ tịch UNI Group, ông Nguyễn Anh Đức, phó tổng đốc Sài Gòn Khớp, bà Nguyễn Lan Phương, luật sư của công ty luật Baker & McKenzie, và sự điều phối của ông Lê Quốc Vinh, chủ tịch CEO của Lê Bros. Xin được cảm ơn các vị diễn giả của phiên thứ 2. Xin được cảm ơn ông Lê Trọng Minh, tổng biên tập báo đầu tư, trưởng ban tổ chức. Và trong khi bộ phận kỹ thuật của chúng tôi đang set up lại bàn dành cho các diễn giả, xin được kính mời các vị diễn giả có tên chúng ta di chuyển dần lên phía trên sân khấu để chúng ta ổn định vị trí chuẩn bị cho phiên thứ 3 với nội dung phát triển thương hiệu hậu M&A. Xin được kính mời các vị diễn giả chúng ta cùng di chuyển dần lên sân khấu ạ.